Today's video, I want to look at Amy Johnson, the lady that flew from England to Australia, but also Yorkshire's hidden histories. This girl is fantastic. Her videos are brilliant. I remember I did a reaction to the history of rugby league, and it was fascinating, and she puts in such great detail. So make sure you check her channel out, and let's get watching this.
Amy Johnson set out for the longest journey of her life. She had only been flying for a year and a half and only had a pilot's licence for a year. She had never before flown outside of England. In fact, her longest journey to that point had been from London to Hull.
And some would say, even that's too far. Just saying, some would say.
And yet here she was, 26 years old, about to fly alone 11,000 miles from England to Australia. She would fly through monsoons, desert sandstorms, over jagged mountain ranges and oceans teeming with sharks before landing successfully in Australia in 20 days. This is a story of Amy Johnson, Yorkshire's flying queen. So join me as we look at this part of Yorkshire's hidden history.
I love the dressing up she does as well. She's so brilliant.
Amy Johnson was born here in 1903, the same year that the Wright brothers made their landmark flight. She inherited the spirit of adventure from her family. Her grandfather was a Norwegian fisherman, and her father had once travelled to Canada in search of gold. Wow.
And I would say, if she was born in 1903, so this was a long time ago, and you've got to think of the social side of things as well. What women were expected to do. Whether you like it or not, in those times, women were expected to run the house and be wives. And were they expected to fly planes, which I would assume at that time was seen as a man's job. Oh, how times have changed for the better. But, you know, breaking those walls, basically, that she did.
One day, as the story goes, as a child, she happened to see a plane in a newsreel at the cinema and was transfixed. She sat through the entire programme again just to get another glimpse of it. It wasn't until shortly after her 16th birthday that she first took a ride in a plane. 5 minutes later, they were back on Earth and she was immensely disappointed. Fortunately, this did not deter her.
How many times? It's lovely. I'm a football coach, so quite often I say to children, young children, what do you want to do when you're older? How many of those children actually then follow through, find a passion, find something on TV or have experienced something and actually then continue and do that as a job later on in life? Not many, I bet. Not many. So it's amazing to think that Amy Johnson as a child saw about planes and then actually followed through with it. I think that's incredible. Interesting that she didn't, you know, it wasn't a very successful first flight, but...
Moving to London, she got a job at a solicitor's. Fortunately, she lived fairly close to the London Aeroplane Club's airfield at Edgware. This was right in the middle of the 1920s flying craze. In 1927, Charles Lindbergh made the first solo transatlantic flight. In 1928, the Australian Bert Hinkler was the first to fly solo from England to Australia in 15.5 days. That same year, Mary Heath was the first to fly solo from South Africa to England, and Mary Bailey had completed the longest female solo flight, a 16,000-mile-long return trip from England to South Africa in 1928 and 29. It is in this context that Amy took her first flying lesson in 1928. But it was a complete disaster. Fortunately, she persevered, saving up her wages for lessons until, in June 1929, she made her first solo flight. The first woman to get a pilot's licence was in 1911. When Amy received hers, she was only the 37th woman to do so. But she was not content with simply flying.
I think that just highlights my earlier point of it goes against the social norms at the time of women being allowed to almost do these things. It's like they weren't allowed to. So incredible that there were certain women that broke down those barriers.
Planes, she wanted to fix them as well. To that end, she began hanging around with the mechanics, to
God.
some chagrin, before eventually working full-time at the aerodrome. Shortly afterwards, she passed her ground engineer's certificate exam, becoming the first British woman to do so. The list of records to break was
Brilliant.
swiftly dwindling, and Amy was probably feeling quite anxious to get going and break one. This desire found itself travelling all the way to the Dundee Courier in this article from January 10th, 1930, in which Amy reportedly declared that she wanted to beat Bert Hinkler's record. Despite numerous factual errors in the article, it was enough to cause a stir and draw significant attention to her mission.
Straight away, it's in a newspaper article here, but that was enough. This is the sign of the times, isn't it? This was the social media back in the day, I suppose. Incredible that small article was enough to really cause a stir, and a woman saying that she wants to beat a man's record. That's crazy. Like as I said, just put yourselves in the shoes of the day then, and think, well, what would people have thought of that? I would assume that it would be more, she can't do that, than, yeah, go girl.
However, few were willing to provide financial backing for the journey. Perhaps it was the sheer outlandishness of it. Perhaps it was her relative inexperience. In the end, it was the Director of Civil Aviation, Sir Sefton Branca, who finally took a chance on Amy, securing backers for her journey. But the final and most crucial ingredient of her journey, the plane, was still missing. The craft that would carry her all that way, a second-hand de Havilland gypsy moth, painted dark green and named Jason, was bought by her parents and she was ready to go. Monday the 5th of May. The starting point was London. There were 3 basic instruments which she would use to navigate to Australia. An altimeter, an airspeed indicator, and a compass.
To 3 things. To work out how high you are, the speed you're going, and which direction you're going. That is pure basic stuff. And that, just think about what planes have now. Planes don't fly themselves now. You know, so back in the day, to fly all that way with those 3 things, it is technically all you really need, but wow, what a challenge.
Most navigation was done by looking for landmarks or following a route on a map. Fuel had to be pumped in by hand. There was no radio and no way of signalling for help. Once you're up there, you were alone. So off she went on this great journey and arrived in Vienna late in the afternoon. Despite being a qualified ground engineer, the Austrian mechanics would not allow her to work on her own plane, and she found that the next morning she had to clean up their shoddy work. From there she stopped at Aleppo on Wednesday. On Thursday she flew towards Baghdad. But a sandstorm over the desert caused her engine to give out and she dropped 2,000 feet before it spluttered back to life again. This continued over and over until she was forced to land and wait 3 hours for the storm to clear.
I've got a sneaky suspicion, I've not seen this, but I've got a sneaky suspicion this is going to be problem after problem after problem that she has to overcome, which just makes the story even more incredible, doesn't it? She reached Baghdad on Friday. But upon landing, one of the undercarriage struts broke. It was soon fixed. But as she flew over the Persian Gulf and landed at Bandar Abbas in Iran, it broke again, and she spent the entire night fixing it, along with the rest of the plane, with the British consul's mechanic. On the Saturday, after flying 9 hours to Karachi, now in Pakistan. Upon landing, she realised that one of the plugs had been incorrectly set the night before and was causing sparks. It's over and over.
Had it been closer to the engine, it could have caused a fire. It was now the 6th day of her journey. She had flown 4,000 miles and beaten the speed record for a flight from England to India.
Well, there's one record.
Previously held by Bert Hinkler. She was well on her way to beating his England to Australia record. She set off again the next day and reached Jhansi in India. On the morning of Monday the 12th, she set off and reached Calcutta in the evening. The next morning she flew through a monsoon to Rangoon in Burma and crash-landed on playing fields 10 miles away. Jason ended up nose down in a ditch, with one of the wings smashed, a tyre ripped open and the undercarriage damaged.
Amy was in despair. One can only imagine the sadness and frustration caused by the realisation that her journey may be over, having come so far and achieved so much. But, as luck would have it, she crashed near the Engineering Institute, and soon dozens of students came to help.
Wow.
Together they managed to fix the damaged plane, working continually in pouring rain and swarms of insects until Thursday, when the repairs were finished and Jason was towed to Rangoon.
I think this is similar with cars. How people always say, with now having so many electronics and things in a vehicle, it's so much harder just to fix. It seems very similar to this. But it is incredible how a wing can be completely destroyed and nosediving into the ground, and they're still able to fix it. I think that is incredible. That is amazing. Especially back then, that maybe the resources weren't as ready available. I don't know, but the way that they're able to fix things as and when a problem goes wrong, whether or not that actually adds to more problems, I don't know.
She set off for Bangkok on Friday.
The time lost due to repairs meant that she could no longer beat Bert Hinkler's record, and it must have caused considerable sadness to realise that. However, like the Cutty Sark in her famous race against the Thermopylae, which she lost, all that mattered now was reaching the finishing line.
After getting lost in the mountains, a half-hour journey which turned into a 3-hour one, she reached Bangkok in the evening and was greeted by a huge crowd.
One wonders how she was coping with exhaustion. She was flying for an average of 9 hours a day, often through difficult and perilous conditions which required immense skill and concentration. She was off again on Saturday morning, but a heavy storm forced her to fly as low as 50 feet to follow the coastline. The rain was so strong that she couldn't see through her goggles, and she was forced to fly without them, the rain stinging her face and eyes.
Landing at Singora in Thailand, once again thousands flocked to see her. She landed at Singapore on Sunday and left the following morning for Java.
A violent rainstorm forced her to fly lower and lower until she was almost skimming the water. A lack of fuel forced her to land in the bamboo fields of a sugar factory, which caused a number of holes in Jason's wings. These were soon repaired, but the work cost another day. She would not set off for Timor Island until Thursday.
Darkness and a lack of fuel meant that she could not land where she wanted on the island, and so had to make do.
She soon saw dozens of tribesmen armed with knives and spears racing towards her, and she was probably thinking,
I'm going to die here.
I'm going to get killed here. But fortunately, the leader took her through the jungle to a church mission, where she was soon met by officials from the aerodrome where she was supposed to land.
It's incredible, because it's like, 1 minute it's dreadful, it's such bad luck and such bad coincidence, and then it is pure luck and, with someone coming to rescue her. It's, wow. But she set the goal of to beat Hinkler, who did it in 15, 16 days. And obviously she realised, I'm not going to do that, even though she started so well. I wonder what was going through her head. That's all I can think. What was she thinking at the time?
On Saturday the 24th of May, Empire Day, there came the last leg of her journey. Flying over the ocean, she spotted a ship and people on deck and threw a cake down to them.
And then, seeing Melville Island, she knew she was close to her destination.
And dramatically threw her navigation notes out of the cockpit.
Approaching Darwin, she could see the crowds throng the airport. And she landed. One can only imagine the emotions of the moment. To have overcome so many challenges, endured so many setbacks, but carried on resolutely, even when she knew she could not beat the record, but still make another.
Is that not just women for you in general? Generalising, but women get knocked down and they get straight back up again, having to deal with so many different adversaries, and keep getting up and continuing. she must have been gutted to not be able to break the record because of all these different problems, weather and landing and things like that. But actually, the achievement, insane, absolutely insane. She wanted to fight against the stigma of being a woman, being able to fly, being able to fix her own plane.
The next few days must have felt like a whirlwind. There were important people to meet, crowds to wave to, letters to answer, and the beginning of Amy Mania.
I would like to ask, if she didn't really, while she was in the air especially, she didn't have any form of communication, because she only had the three things: the altimeter, the speedometer, and the compass. How did the people know at each stop that she was going to be there if the timings were off? So for lots, you see when she landed in Darwin how many people were there to welcome and congratulate her. But how did they know she was going to be there at that specific point? Because they're not just going to linger there for hours and hours and hours hoping she comes. Hopefully someone can answer me that.
The song Amy became a hit, soon followed by songs like Our Aeroplane Girl, and all manner of commemorative objects were made. She was awarded a CBE in the King's Birthday Honours, and on a flight to Sydney as a passenger she met her future husband Jim Mollison. Together they became an aviation power couple, the Flying Mollisons, who regularly flew together. An attempt to break the world long-distance record ended, however, in a crash in Connecticut, which injured them both.
Throughout the 1930s, she set a number of solo and co-pilot records, dined with Roosevelt and Amelia Earhart, was made the youngest president of the Women's Engineering Society, and given more awards than you could hang your hat on.
In 1940, she joined the women's section of the Air Transport Auxiliary, who transported
Incredible.
aircraft between bases and from factories to airfields.
On the 5th of January 1941, on a flight from Blackpool to Oxford, she went missing in bad weather over the Thames estuary. There's some debate over the circumstances of her death, but I think it's more appropriate to reflect on her achievements, as the Yorkshire Evening Post wrote just a few days after her death.
By her remarkable flights to Australia, to America, to Japan and China and across Africa and the equinox to the Cape, she proved that women could achieve and maintain a high place in aviation.
I think this woman was incredible. This is the sort of woman who should be talked about in schools for kids, to set an example for other girls and women, and actually even boys and men, because she went against the social norms. Let's be honest, women weren't expected or even pushed to be pilots and mechanics, because that was seen as a manly job. But no, that didn't deter her. It's women. As I said, where would men be without women? It's like me. Where would I be without Charlie? They are incredible, and as I said, these are the real role models that women should look up to. Not these Instagram models or all those, not even YouTubers. These are the people that did something. And whether she wanted to do it for women, she probably didn't. She wanted to do it for herself and show that she can achieve things. But what an incredible feat, and what she then carried on doing throughout her life. Amy Johnson, Yorkshire's flying queen. What an incredible story of adversity and accomplishment and determination. Fantastic. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learnt something new. Make sure you check out Yorkshire's Hidden Histories channel, and I will catch you next time.